product of this fine group, which is, we don't get to do that all the time. Still, yes, she is. There she is. So Miss Hannah Holden, she's a facilitator, twice certified coach, and transformational speaker, a leadership expert, and U.S. Marine Corps veteran, making history among the first women on multiple assignments.
Hoorah.
Hannah has coached hundreds of leaders across dozens of industries, leading to a wide range of personal and professional transformations. And I think that's all I need to say. So, ladies and gentlemen, Hannah Holden.
I'll test a couple of things. That was more than enough. Thank you. So this lucky guy right here gets to help me out to make sure that everybody has a handout this evening. So thank you. He's actually my brother, so he gets to, also a Marine Corps veteran, so he gets some added tasks. And you can just get
What is your first name? Purple.
What's the name of the API?
Adam Walsh.
Oh, got you right here.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's so nice to be back. As was mentioned, I was a part of Eagle Group. I landed in Eagle Group in 2018 when I first moved back to Minnesota. And I realized that we might all be here for different reasons. So some of you may be here trying to find how you can get a part-time job. Some of you might have a great job and you're just wondering how you can connect with the community, or maybe you're just wanting to get that next position. And maybe some of you are here thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what I want to do with my life, or I just feel like where I'm at doesn't fit me. And I will admit that my presentation is geared a little bit towards that last group. However, I really hope that some of the things I share can be beneficial to anyone here. I always like to give the caveat that, I'm going to present some ideas tonight. Maybe they fit. If they fit, pick it up, take it with you. If it doesn't fit, just feel free to just kick it to the side. So my name is Hannah Holden. You heard the introduction about me. And today I'm really going to be talking about how you can cultivate your purpose after the military. So first we'll be talking about what are some of the challenges that military veterans face through career transition. How can you cultivate your purpose after the military? And then for some of you, maybe wondering what are some of those tangible first steps you could take. So maybe some people who want something to walk away with. Before I go further in, I will say that I got that little Christmas bag up there and some note cards next to it. So at the end of my presentation, I am going to do a giveaway for some coaching. So I will pick a few people to do some coaching with. So as you hear my presentation, if you get to a point and you're like, you know what, I think it would be helpful to sit down with Hannah and do some sessions. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but just take one of those index cards, put your name, put your email address, if you want to put what you're interested in coaching about, and just drop it in that Christmas bag and I will do a drawing, okay? All right. So we're going to get started with what are some of the challenges that veterans face in transition. And so I want you to take a moment to find a buddy next to you. And I know you're sitting here by yourself, but find someone, figure someone you can connect with. And I want you to take, let's just take 4 to 5 minutes and chat with the person next to you about, what has been the biggest challenge you faced? Either, and I understand some of you, maybe your transition was a while ago, some of you it's current. What is the biggest challenge you faced in military transition? And I'll call you back here in a few minutes.
Yeah, so I just right now, yeah. So being outraged. My job. Final formation. What is the final formation? Any of these people. That's more than like, all right, so here's. I didn't get to it's almost night. Yeah. I might be removing of that. It's like, all right, well, I guess. Yeah, it worked out. It's like. I'm not as able to his boss. Put you into a room. Kind of a chair. I mean, every time I yeah, I didn't think that. That's really cool. That's going way back. There was like a so the one thing I've kind of learned is they're kind of a tangent, but luckily that we that's where they like I think leadership and benefit and feeling that I knew I was happy with kind of like a big round. There's a hot like anything I've talked about. But it has to do with and a lot of it. It's still there's leadership that isn't usually okay, there you go. That's where I was. It's great. Oh. But being able to see that is figured out a lot of because you that's what I said. I'm like, I said to myself, I know. But here's the deal. I stress better. It's like, that was in a safe. That was the reason. Yeah. Yeah. It's sorry.
All right, I think I'll go ahead and just pull everyone back here to the larger group. But I hope you had some good conversations with the people next to you. And I'd like to just see if there's a couple people who want to share something that was discussed in your group. Maybe some people who don't want to, but anybody feel like, yeah, come back here.
Direction of what you want to do when you become an adult.
Say that again.
Finding a direction of what you want to do when you become an adult.
Yeah, but I'm never growing up.
May be true, but you still need money to eat.
Defining a direction. And let's go over here. Hello.
Most of us hear the translation of the job roles in the military, but experiencing it from that side is you honestly have no idea where your skills fit in. So when I got out, I transitioned from the Navy as a nuclear mechanic. I had no idea what that applied to besides working at a nuke plant or something. And it was really just luck of the draw that I landed in the maintenance field, which I didn't even know was a field. And I've been charging forward with ever since. I don't know how to make that better besides having the liaisons with the companies, being able to translate those, and then organizations like this to be able to help the veterans themselves translate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We'll go right here.
How's it going?
Figure.
Oh, I won't do a story time, but so in the Army, we did a career plan, right? Like your first 3 years, you'll have whatever duty assignments, and then some whatever on you go. At 6 years, you can get out, all that stuff. But I got my first job out of the Army. You know, I sat down and similarly made a plan, right? So my first 3 years, I will did it. After 3 years, I'll look at roles, but and laid off. Like, okay, not a big deal. Resilience, right? So we do the thing, we get another job, we go in, like, all right, new place, new setting, industry change for me. So let's look at the roles. What's the career path look like? What am I going to do? And laid off. Like, okay, all right, not a big deal. But the challenge is, you know, the unpredictability, right? Like how, like I try to look years ahead and chart that life path, but then that never works. So like my horizon is now like a month, and that constant like, well, what if I get laid off again? I didn't have that in the Army. So I guess bottom line up front, security is the biggest challenge in the transition.
Is that why you work for the state?
All right. Thanks everyone for speaking up here. So
Low risk, low. Exactly.
I think we can all agree that there's some challenges with transition. And for some of us, we've had multiple transitions. I think I counted one time how many jobs I've had, and it's been a lot. But I think transitions can happen over and over again. Maybe you have that first transition when you leave the military, but then that doesn't necessarily mean you've landed where you're going to be. You might get laid off. It might not be the right fit. And sometimes we go through transition after transition after transition. And I like to say that sometimes for veterans, transition can be a state of mind also, because there's so much that can be going on within us that it can take many years. I got out of the Marine Corps in 2010. It took me a number of years to kind of find my path, and I'm still finding it all the time, but this is a process. Some of the other challenges that I'm aware of, or at least were part of my journey, I remember getting out of the Marine Corps and looking at jobs and feeling like there were positions that I was interested in, and I felt like I was both overqualified and underqualified for some of those positions. I don't know if anyone can relate to that. You have all of this experience, you had to learn all these skills, maybe multiple deployments, and then you apply for an entry-level position and you get rejected because you don't have that specific experience. So that was one of the challenges I faced. I remember my first job after the Marine Corps, after I went to college, making less money than I made in the Marine Corps at JP Morgan of all places. So I think sometimes negotiating and getting the salary that we feel we're worthy of, that can be a challenge. Finding direction, finding the right fit, connections, all of these things. There's things that can be happening that are a challenge for us. Another one that I remember is that I was pretty naive about what certain jobs were. I remember thinking, oh, project manager, that sounds really interesting. I like variety. That'd be so good. That is probably like the least aligned position for my personality, the least aligned. And I know I'm not the only veteran who probably looked at a title and was like, oh, I think I could do that. And we make up some story in our mind about what that job is because we have absolutely no idea what these civilian positions are. So that was another thing that I faced. I also, for me, meaning and purpose was always a big deal. So when I finished the Marine Corps, I pursued my degree in peace studies and women's and gender studies. I wanted to do something that had meaning. And I remember interviewing for a position to try to kind of go in that direction. It was actually at a women's shelter in the south side of Chicago. And they offered me a whopping $30,000. And I was really at that. I was like, well, I'd like to do something that gives me a sense of meaning and purpose, but I'm not going to do that for $30,000. And so some of those challenges also, how do you find a career that gives you a sense of meaning and purpose, but also giving you that security that you need as well. So uncertainty is hard. I think that's a big piece of transition as well, is just all of the uncertainty that comes with moving. We go from city to city, or we're moving around. We're trying to figure out, where our next job is going to be. Maybe for me at the time, I wasn't married and I didn't have kids. That made it easier. But just all of the uncertainty of how am I going to, take care of myself, take care of my family. But the beautiful thing about uncertainty is that that's where the most possibility lies. That's one thing that I've learned. And so I heard this quote one time that the opposite of certainty is not uncertainty. The opposite of certainty is possibility. So there are things that a blank page, a blank canvas, being totally lost can give you that you will never experience if you're not there. I like to use this metaphor of being lost. I grew up, my parents both went to forestry school. I learned orienteering at a young age. And I just think about that metaphor of being lost. And there are things that you can only learn by getting lost. And sometimes you can't really find yourself unless you allow yourself to get lost. So there really is possibility in that uncertainty. And I know it can be challenging, but that's kind of why we're here today, is to talk about some of the ways that you can cultivate that purpose. So I want to talk about human needs, because this is something that I realized, was another challenge leaving the military, is that I went from having most of my human needs met to having pretty much none of them met. And I didn't put this together until, years later. But I think maybe some of you can relate to this. We talked about security was mentioned, and that kind of falls with the certainty. But there's a lot of other human needs that we have. And I've realized that when people leave the military, a lot of times we're also experiencing a loss of some of our basic human needs. So, we've got certainty, which is that safety, that comfort, that security. We've got another human need of variety, which is almost kind of can be the opposite of that. It's interesting, but as humans, we have a need for certainty, and we also have a need for a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of variety, a little bit of surprise, risk, challenge. We also have the need for significance, to feel like we are unique and special and that we're needed. I know for me, when I left the Marine Corps, the ones that I lost were the variety, I suppose, because I was doing all the deployments. Definitely the significance, because I wasn't needed. I didn't have, I went from Afghanistan to a college campus being totally anonymous. I wasn't needed. I wasn't special. I wasn't unique. And then, maybe some of the connection and belonging was lost as well. So I think this is a big shift when people leave the military. Whether or not everything is satisfying you in the military, we do tend to lose a lot. And I think that's something that maybe a lot of veterans don't realize. When I left the Marine Corps, it's interesting, because I left the Marine Corps for the other two human needs, because I wanted growth that was unique to me as an individual. And I saw some of the limits in my career, and I wanted contribution. I wanted to make a contribution in the world that was bigger than the Marine Corps. And that was just my personal preference. So I'm curious, and I want to mention the handouts, because we're definitely not going through all the questions on the handouts. We are definitely not doing that. However, as a life coach, I wanted to give everyone a handout so that if there's a specific section we talk about tonight that piques your interest and you want to take it back and go sit with these questions, you can. Maybe you want to have a date night with your spouse and go through them, whatever you feel like doing. But there is a question on there about needs shifting. So I'm curious if there's any brave soul in here who wants to share how you feel like your needs have shifted over time. Just kind of looking at these ones here. Did anything pop up for you when you were hearing about these? Yeah.
Hi, Sheila Jessen from Cargill. I think when I got out of the military in 2012, I was, kind of trying to find my path. It took a couple of years before I landed at Cargill, but right about the same time I came to Eagle Group in 2014. And back then it was small, like 5 or 10 people a month. But I walked out of that room and I was like, oh my God, I found my people. I didn't know I was missing the connection and belonging until I found them again. And I've been coming ever since. And I think that just being in this room, like I kind of sometimes feel like an alien around civilians because they don't get me. They don't know what I've been through. They don't know my language. They don't know my experience. When I come here, everybody here gets it. And so it's like, this is like a safe place to be around people like yourself.
Thank you. And Brad?
I think for me, significance. You know, my last job was working in the Pentagon. I worked for the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army as his PAO. Then I was in charge of digital media for the United States Army, you know, their website, their social media sites. I got out. I applied for a couple jobs. I walked into those interviews and I'm like, I got this. They didn't give a shit who I was. You know, I mean, I was working for the second in command of the United States Army. I couldn't get a job working for our company as their public affairs officer. I didn't understand that nobody knew, even though I was from here. I came back after I retired. So the significance was a big thing for me. And just like Sheila said, I mean, I somehow ran into the Eagle Group. Actually, it was a college buddy of mine, but the guy by some of you might know him, Mike Pavic. I don't know if you know him. But we linked up because we both retired at the same time, and they kind of helped me get back into saying they don't know what skills you have because you aren't really from here anymore. You're coming back in. So, you know, this group really did help me, and the significance was a big deal because I was like, I'm somebody really, I've done a lot in my career and now all of a sudden I'm nobody. So I think that was a big thing for me and as a big step.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was a huge one for me after the Marine Corps. Right before I got out of the Marine Corps, you know, I thought I was such a badass. I just come from a 9-month deployment in Afghanistan. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I am. But I thought I was such a badass, you know, like, you know, I thought I'd reached my peak in the Marine Corps. I had just done a deployment with MARSOC and was attached to an ODA for several months. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I'm such a badass. I'm going to go on to do some other crazy, cool career, intelligence career. I'm going to work for the State Department. I had all these, you know, thoughts running through my head. And man, reality hits when you get out of the military, especially if you're dealing with things, you know, reality hits and it can take time to process and to just kind of find your stride. So human needs shift and that's okay. And, you know, over time, I've learned to kind of shift more into the growth and contribution, but that does not happen overnight. So maybe some other people have a path or a journey that looks kind of like this. There's probably a lot more roads. There's some little, you know, paths I tried to take and then I turned around and came back. So this is probably not even the full road that I would have taken. But there's a, you know, I'm a kind of a quote person, and I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of Michael Bernard Beckwith, or maybe you even heard me share this quote, but I have this quote that he says that I love, which is, your pain pushes you until your vision pulls you. And I think that really encompasses that shift of we're trying to meet those needs, but then, you know, maybe it's pain, maybe it's, you know, for me, for a long time, it was, at times it was fear pushing me or pain pushing me. And so I really got clear on who I was and what I wanted the vision for my life to be. So again, your pain pushes you until your vision pulls you. And once I created that vision, I found that it pulled me out of bed in the morning. You know, maybe there were still some bad days, but it pulled me out of bed and gave me something to be excited about, you know, and I really started to see the rewards of self-development and how I could make myself basically into whoever I wanted to be, who I really was. I think in the military, when we put that uniform on, we inherit almost like an identity in the military. And when we walk away from the military and we're not wearing that uniform anymore, it's kind of that question of, well, who am I? What is truly me? And what have I put on and been wearing that isn't even me anymore? And I think that for me was one of the questions that I had to answer. So how can you cultivate your purpose after the military? So one strategy is to follow your curiosity. I hear people sometimes say, well, you know, this is my calling. You know, I'm sure you've heard people, this is my calling. And I was never one of those, this is my calling, because when I got out of the military, I was obsessed with the question of what is my purpose? I was obsessed with finding significance again. But the idea of having a calling in the world felt far too large for me. So I bring this one up because if the idea of having a calling feels a little bit much, a little bit big, or even the idea of having a purpose feels a little delusional, maybe for a couple of you, then I would say, look at your curiosity. because there are things that you're curious about naturally drawn to, and those can tell you a lot about yourself. They can tell they're signals. And I really believe that if there was a string, curiosity would be on one side of it and your purpose the other. So don't be afraid to follow those things that you're curious about and give them a try. Maybe it's that thing that you stay up late at night searching on Google, totally clean, something you're searching on Google that's totally clean. But maybe there's something that you're curious about and it just keeps getting your attention. You don't really understand why, but maybe it's getting your attention. I know. I felt like I had to say that in this audience before someone else made the joke, but anyways, it can really tell you a lot. And one of the first career moves that I made that kind of surprised me was following a curiosity. I, at one point in my journey had just finished my MBA. It was in global social sustainable enterprise. I thought I knew the path I was going. And I saw a job when I first moved back to Minnesota to be a speaking coach. And just something about it, I was like, this just sounds interesting. It was totally off track from where I thought I was going. So sometimes those curiosities can really lead you somewhere. So has anyone seen one of these recently? Maybe it's been a while. Maybe a little bit of a newer model. All right. So my brother's here, so he'll remember this. But when we were kids, we used to play the game where, you saw one of these, you got to hit each other, right? Slug bug, right? Yeah. Whoever played that game, oh, wow. A lot of people in here. And wasn't it interesting how when you weren't playing that game, you'd be out, your parents are driving, you're in the back of the station wagon. We were always in the back of the station wagon facing outward. And you'd never see these on the road ever until you were playing the game. You were looking, you're just looking, just waiting to see one so you can hit your brother. I have 3 brothers. And once you start looking for it, that's when you see it. And it's interesting. I would say that we're surrounded by so much data, whatever it may be. Our thoughts, there's some controversy over how many thoughts we have a day, somewhere in the range of between 6,000 and 60,000 thoughts per day. And then they say 75% of them are from the day before, and a whole lot of those can be negative. But think of this as your filter. If you aren't filtering, if you aren't choosing what to focus on, it's really easy to go negative. Like if I'm looking for what's wrong with me, and I remember for some time asking myself, what's wrong with me? And guess what? I would find a whole lot of answers to that question when I was in a dark spell. What's wrong with you, Hannah? Like, why can't you just get this? What's wrong with me? And it's amazing when you ask those kinds of self-critical questions, how many answers just come to you, But if you start asking empowering questions of yourself, what is going right with me? What am I naturally gifted at? How do I feel like I'm here to serve and uplift others? What is this trying to teach me? I feel like that was the empowering question that I started asking myself that changed my life, because I went from, why is this happening to me, to, well, what is this trying to teach me about myself? And so learning to ask those empowering questions, if you're trying to kind of pick up that path and find purpose and meaning in your life, you're not going to find it asking the negative, because there's always going to be a plethora of answers. But if you can start that journey with yourself of asking those empowering questions, yeah, you might be amazed where it takes you. Just got to see how I'm doing on time. All right. So I have a question for the audience. We've all got different resources, right? Maybe, luckily in the US, we probably have a substantial amount of resources, maybe the possessions that we have, money in our bank account. What do you think? I'm just curious. What do you think is your most valuable resource?
Caring for people.
Caring for people. What else? Tenacity. Resilience.
Critical thinking skills.
Time, critical thinking. What else? Family. So my answer to this question would be that your most valuable resource is your energy. That's my answer. Now, you might all have your own answer, but I really believe that your energy is your most valuable resource. And we only have so much of it. Similar to time, we only have so much of it. We can only give it to so many places. There can only be so many priorities if you're a busy person. Not like Chip. Chip's not, we found out earlier, he's not busy. Wide open schedule. But really, our energy is our greatest resource. And so when you want to think about how you're using your time, if you're trying to cultivate more purpose and meaning, maybe in your life or in your career, how are you taking care of your energy? And one of the things that I learned along my journey was that you really have to be able to pay yourself first. And I remember, I think it was 2019, I was in a pretty, tough job situation, high stress. I was stressed all the time. Anybody who's worked in sales might know what that's like. You make a sale and you feel excited and you go home and you got to figure out how to do it again tomorrow. And, there was a time in that job where 2 months in, I was in probation. I was going to get fired because I wasn't hitting my sales numbers. And then I kind of learned and adapted and learned how to do sales more. But I bring up this story because I was kind of stuck. I would come home every day. I had no energy for anything else because the stress was overpowering, the anxiety. I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking about my boss. I would wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety. She loved to send emails on Sunday, so I couldn't even have my Sunday because I'd already be aware of what was going to happen when I walked in on, we get the spur of the moment. There's a meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. and it'd be, last minute on a Sunday. But the stress got to me, and the practice that saved me was that I started carving out some time for myself. I started waking up 20, 30 minutes earlier. So at the time, my old MO was that I would wake up, I would anxiously check my phone, check my work email, see what craziness might have come in at, 5:30 in the morning. And then I would, go about my day. But when I made the shift to take 20 to 30 minutes, have some time with myself, not check the email. And the practice for me at the time was I was reading a book. It's called Girl Wash Your Face. I don't know. Girl Wash Your Face. But I was reading it at the time, and it put me on to gratitude journaling. So I would wake up, I would take that time, I would list 5 things that I was grateful for. And then the other practice was to write 10 dreams for my future that had come as if they'd already come true, write them in the present. And it's amazing how I will still pick that up at different times, how many things off that list have come true, which is pretty amazing. But it wasn't until I carved out that time. So for some of you, if you're in a, you're in a job, you like it, but you feel like there's something else, or maybe you're in a rough spot like I was at the time, how are you paying yourself first? And this could be carving out time to sit with yourself, to reflect, to really ponder what you need. But it might also be just, hey, the gym gives me energy. That's another thing that gives me energy. So I know I need to put that at, the top of my list, because if I don't, it's never going to happen. So just knowing, how can you pay yourself first? And I would tuck in here also, this is things like your daily rituals, routines, the rhythm with which you go through your life, and your habits. A really good, I'm sure some people in here have heard of Atomic Habits, but I really love that book, the way it talks about habits and identity, because our habits really become who we are. And there's this interplay between our habits and our identity, and that shift that needs to happen in how we see ourselves, and our habits influence how we see ourselves. So I think a big key when it comes to cultivating your purpose. And there's some questions, like I said, we're not going through all these questions on the handout, but there are some questions on there about, what renews your energy, what drains it, and then how could you shift some of those things to pay yourself first. There's a video somewhere about rocks in a jar, and it kind of shows, what are your biggest rocks, and then your small rocks, and then sand. And it made me realize how often I was starting out my day putting sand in my jar, the little things that don't matter, and I would run out of space for those big rocks. And so I really like that video. I wish I remember who it was so I could credit them, but I think it's a really good metaphor for how we take care of ourselves. All right, so some ambiguous shapes here. We're not all circles. We're not all squares or triangles. We're all a little bit different, right? Just because we're all veterans, I could ask all of you in this room what is most important to you. And just because we're veterans, or maybe you're a military spouse, you're military community connected, that does not mean that what's most important to you is what's most important to me. So we do have those differences. And I'm really talking about personal values here. Anyone who is, wait, let me check. Who is in the Marine Corps in here? I think there's got to be a, all right. Yeah, so we've got a handful of Marines in here.
That's a good slide.
Right? It's really simple, right? No, really simple or not, I don't know. But in the Marine Corps, the core values, right? And what's interesting is similar to what I was saying earlier about, you're given the uniform, you're kind of given these values, but just because someone hands you some core values, you have to decide if they have meaning for you. We all decide what meaning we give to things. So your personal values are going to help you decide what's most important to you in life. And they're gonna, the meaning that you give to those values is critical. So another way to cultivate your purpose after the military is to get really clear on your personal values. It's a personal values clarification. For me, this was life-changing. It made me realize, all of the decisions that I had made and why they bothered me. So when I would go left and I should have gone right, and I would be frustrated or stressed, or jobs were misaligned, relationships were misaligned. Why were they misaligned? Well, because I'm a circle. I put circle first, and I'm working in an organization that puts a circle last, So if I'm a circle and I'm working for a company that doesn't give a crap about circles, then there's probably going to be a problem. And that's true for the organization you work in. That could be true for personal relationships, your boss. So really getting clear on what your personal values are. Now, if you are interested in this, you can Google personal values list, or you can grab my email and I'll send you a list. But take some time and sit down and think, what are those top 5 personal values? My top personal value is freedom. And it's interesting now, I can see all the times where I was frustrated, where I ended up getting, frustrated with a job or those types of situations. And it's because there was a conflict with those values. So I couldn't emphasize this one enough, actually, how life-changing this can be to sit down and do that process and really get clear, especially on the top 2. So there's some questions on that handout of what are your top 2 personal values, and then how do you live those out? And then really, what value do you need to be using to make decisions? Because it comes down to those forks in the road. I had one back in August, for example, to kind of highlight this a little bit more. The contract at my full-time job was ending, and I thought, oh, this is my chance. I'm going to jump into my business full-time. Can't wait. It's scary, but I'm so excited. And so that's the freedom, my top personal value. I want to work for myself. I want to do what I want to talk about purpose with veterans or whatever the hell else I feel like doing. And just when I was getting ready to make that leap, I get a call from a recruiter about another position. And I loved the hiring manager. There was a lot of purpose in the work and all of these things. And it was so tempting. It was a really tough decision. And they wanted to pay me more money than I've ever made. And it was a tough decision because when I was earlier talking about the human needs, there were some human needs that were being met, things like security, certainty, even connection and belonging, because sometimes working alone as a solopreneur is lonely. So there were human needs with that job that were going to be met. However, I thought, you know what, if I take this job and I get, the money and I get the needs met, in a year to 2 years, I'm going to be thinking, well, why didn't I just go for it? Freedom is my top value. My second value after that is purpose. So if I'm taking the job just to meet the human needs, but I'm totally negating my top 2 personal values, I'm just kicking that can down the road. And I'm getting a couple years older. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with taking a job when you need to take a job. I've taken a lot of jobs because I needed to take a job. However, getting clear on those personal values and starting to think about decisions from that perspective will help you weigh what are the needs, what are the personal values, and you'll be able to make better decisions. And I'll tell you, in case I forget to say it at some point in this presentation, the more that you become aligned with who you truly are, your personal values, your true nature. So aligning with that true nature, not the mask or the uniform or anything else you put on. The more you start to line those things up, yes, you're going to find purpose and meaning, but guess what? You're going to be more successful too. People feel that. People know when you're being authentic. They know when there's actually some weight behind what you're doing because you've thought about it. You've reflected on it. You know who you are. You know what's important to you. You know what your gifts, your strengths are. You know what you have to offer. And that's a game changer when it comes to confidence in interviewing and turning down jobs. All right, I thought this guy was pretty great, so I put him up here. So another big shift in my life that I want to share with you was a shift where I went from being what I would say externally directed to being self-directed. And for me, externally directed is letting other people tell you who you are. It's letting other people tell you what you should do. It's constantly seeking some sort of validation. And I'm not saying this to shame anyone. We all do it. We're like, well, especially me after the Marine Corps, I asked anyone who would listen, what do you think I should do with my life? You know, it was like, I asked everybody. It was like, I was obsessed. You know, anybody who knew me knew that I was probably going to ask them, well, do you think I should take this job? You think I should do this? But and there's nothing wrong with getting opinions from trusted advisors and connecting and having those conversations. But if you constantly ask everyone outside of yourself what you should do, who you are, that doesn't help you build self-esteem. That doesn't help you build self-trust and self-confidence. And it's a way of kind of hiding from ourselves because we're letting everyone else point us in the direction when instead of looking outside of ourselves, we need to trust that we are actually the experts of ourselves and we are the experts of our own lives. So this shift is becoming self-directed. And this builds confidence because when you know who you are and you're not dancing to other people's rhythm, you're controlling your own rhythm. This is a game changer. Like I said, you're going to show up differently. So people who are even just trying to get that next job, starting to do some of this inner work and this self-discovery work is a game changer so that you go into those conversations being really clear, hey, this is what I'm about. And the conversation shifts because the conversation shifts from, did I pass the test? Will you give me a job? To more so the mindset of, this is who I am. Is this the right vehicle for me to be who I am? Is this job the right vehicle for me to live my purpose? So it definitely shifts things. Anybody ever feel like the white horse in a sea of brown horses? Anybody? Oh, so like I've alluded to before, I think one thing that happens in the military is we blend in. We have to. Conformity. We want to blend in. We have to blend in. It's not about us. It's not about being special or unique, but I'm a white horse. See, we have to blend in with everyone else. But when you get out of the military and you start wanting to pursue a career that aligns with who you are, you have to start being okay with being different. And I think there can be a real challenge between the struggle to belong and fit in. Let me just be a brown horse. It'll be easier if I'm a brown horse, right? I'll fit in, I'll have friends, I'll belong. And we're scared of losing those things when we take a stand and we say, well, I'm different. I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to stand alone, even if it's hard, because at least I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to be myself. So another way to cultivate your purpose is to nurture your true nature. And like I said, for some of us, I think the longer you've been in the military, the harder this gets. I've talked to people, whether it be the military or even other professions, where they've done it so long that they don't really know who they are outside of it. The longer you layer on all of these identities, the harder it is to know, well, what is really true to me? Who am I beneath all the layers, all of the things that I've gone through? So nurturing your true nature, and then figuring out, well, if I'm a white horse, where will a white horse succeed? Instead of trying to be somewhere that you're not going to succeed, you're not going to thrive. So that's another key. I left this little guy up here as a placeholder to talk about fear. I don't want to take too much time. I just want to acknowledge the fact that there can be a lot of fear when it comes to doing something new. And we all have fear. I will tell you that a lot of times our fears like to walk around and hold hands with our desires, because when we desire something, when we want something for ourselves, oh man, those fear gremlins, they just creep up like this guy right here. So that's a part of the process, and we always have fear. I got nervous coming in here. My palms were sweating on the on the steering wheel, and I'm like, why am I so nervous? And then I was like, no, I'm excited. And then all the emotions changed in an hour. But you know, fear is so natural no matter what you're doing. And when you're doing something that's out of your comfort zone, you're going to experience fear. Being out of our comfort zone, we start to feel fear, and it wants to drive us back to what we know. This is just human nature. But I think I'm speaking to a pretty good crowd that we've all done some things where we've had to overcome fear. And there is real rewards in doing that. So I want to really rally around this, that you need to take charge of your career vision. And I understand that a lot of times we feel like, well, I'm just in the stream, it's taking me where it's taking me. But if you really have to take charge, you really have to look at, well, what is it that I want? What are my values? What is the dream life? You know, there's some other questions on that sheet. I've done this with coaching clients. You know, what does your perfect day look like? And sometimes questions like that can feel so ridiculous, because it's like, my perfect day? Are you kidding me? I have to get up. I have to do this. I have to do that. We don't allow ourselves to dream. We don't allow ourselves to imagine the possibility. But let me tell you something. You cannot create something in your life that you can't imagine. So I encourage you to use your imagination, to really think about the possibility and take charge. I had lunch with a friend, you know, maybe 6 months ago, and she was telling me how unhappy she was at her job. And she said, well, maybe the company will let me take this course, but I don't think they're going to let me do this. And we let other people kind of take charge instead of taking charge of our own vision and our own narrative. And sometimes that means that you have to create a vision for your life and a purpose that's just outside of the job. Like, I had to create a purpose statement, and then I had to decide, well, which job is going to let me live that purpose? And let the job be a vehicle for me being myself and me living my purpose. So these are some of the ways that you can cultivate purpose after the military. By cultivating your purpose after the military, you will attract opportunities that are more aligned with who you truly are. So what are a few just quick, tangible next steps? I just wanted to show the difference. This is how I'm a mind map person. I visualize things. This is the difference I felt, the map for getting a job. And, you know, it's a good map. It's a good map for getting a job. And there's probably some things on here that I'm missing. But, you know, maybe at the center is priority of, we want to network. We want to focus on what are my qualifications. And the big one I felt a lot was showing how I fit. Showing, you know, I chose the picture of the dog with the disguise because it's like, let me show how I can fit. But when it comes to finding that direction, finding some purpose, the map's a little bit different. The map that I would give you is to start with more of the inner stuff. And the other stuff is equally as important. It's not like you just spend all your time, you know, in la la land thinking about who you are, but you start there. And the 3 P's that I would say to start with are personal values clarification. That one's key. Your personality. And I say these are your natural born preferences. You have adapted since then. You have developed behaviors, skill sets, mindsets that you've layered on top of that. But I suggest you look at your natural born personality and see what it can tell you about yourself and explore the validity for yourself of that. And then your passions, you know, what are you interested in? So I made one for myself just to give an example. I already talked about my personal values. So freedom, purpose, connection, creativity, and social change. So it's funny, these are validated all the time because by what grabs my attention, you know, oh, remote work, freedom, you know. Someone was just talking to me about a program they're doing in DC, and it was like, lighten up my social change value, you know. So when you get clear on these, you'll realize that there's a lot of validity to this, and it will help you kind of make those choices. The MBTI personality, I actually just got certified in MBTI, but I've had an interest in it for over 10 years. So MBTI can tell you your natural born preferences. There are 4 letters, so it will tell you your preference for how you direct and receive energy, then your natural born preference for how you take in information, your preference for how you make decisions, and then finally your preference for relating to the outside world, and can give you a lot of ideas about what would really be a good fit that would suit you. Again, making you happy, giving you purpose, but also making you more money when you're actually aligned with those things. Passion, another, I have my passions on there. They're not really related to my career except for personal development. The weightlifting, I enjoy that, but I'm never going to have a career as a weightlifter. I mean, it would be great, but so sometimes your passions will be connected and sometimes they won't. But this, I would encourage you, if you're at a point, you're at a crossroads, to come back to this center, these 3 Ps, and look at them and take the time, because then you can build from there. Then you can go back to the others as well. They're very important for getting a job. But if you're in a job and you're not satisfied and you don't feel like it's giving you meaning or it's truly aligned with those natural strengths, it's going to be tough. And I've seen people build entire careers based on someone that's not even true to who they are. And, you know, sometimes we do that, and maybe you have a value that supports that, but not all of us do. And sometimes we have to make a change. Yeah. So this is just in list form. I already hit this, but, you know, I created my own purpose statement, and then I interviewed people on whether, you know, maybe I didn't tell them, but sometimes over time I got more confident doing that. I would tell employers what my purpose was to see if we were a match. But I created my own purpose statement, and then I figured out what are the applications of this. There's actually a lot of applications for me of my purpose. You know, giving this presentation, I do personal coaching, I do executive leadership offsites. There's a lot of things that I do now because I took the time to figure out what my purpose was. And I have that strong foundation when I created my business to live out my purpose in my business. So I just kind of want to leave you with this, because your purpose is based on who you truly are. So it's not about being fake. It's not about being something you're not. It's about showing up in the world as the truest expression of who you are, which will allow you to have the most to offer. So I did quote myself. I did. In a world where most people are afraid to be themselves, your audacity to be authentic has the power to change the world. And I really believe that about all of you. And this is not a overnight. This can take years. It takes a lifetime. But the more you become in alignment with who you are, you will change within and you will change those around you. And I will tell you that transformation has been the most rewarding pursuit of my life. There's nothing else that could compare. So that's kind of the wrap. Like I said, I've got a bag up here with some note cards if anyone wants to drop it in. And now that you've seen the 3 Ps, that is the coaching offering. So we would go through those. So there would be 3 coaching sessions. So if you're interested and you could use some, you know, this will allow me to test out my newly minted Myers-Briggs, you know, certification, but also there's probably a few people in here that might be in that tough spot. So if you are, just drop the card in with your name and email in the bag. But I just want to end with, you know, I'll just say thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for allowing me to come here and speak about something that I am truly passionate about, obviously. And I hope to hear from some of you. I did leave some business cards up here as well. So thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, that was, again, thank you. That was wonderful. So at this part of the meeting is a good part. This is where we do our landings. And I do know that we have at least one.